So the next word on our list was encounter. And I don't know if this was, I was thinking about it sequentially after observation, but it seems to be completely related in my mind at the moment to the problem of being a witness or a participant. Or the kind of the nature of the encounter, depending on what roles you take up in that moment. I think Harold was talking about the inherently participatory nature of observation, and I was thinking about, strangely, the sort of, in relation to my own experience in galleries, for example, my encounter with artworks within galleries, that I kind of like taking a fairly hands-off approach to the experience of looking, so that I mean, sometimes I'll be in a gallery and I'll have a very strong reaction to a piece of work, and I'll be really prompted in that moment to think seriously about it and stay with it for a long time. That's very rare. Normally I feel like I'm sampling, I'm taking things away with me to be interested in afterwards. So it's almost like a gathering process, like a field trip, going to an exhibition and taking works away with me in the form of notes or postcards or just memories. And in a way, I'm kind of resisting analysis in the moment. I'm resisting interpretation almost. I'm really just, I'm enjoying the process of gathering, which I think does have something to do with sort of more amateurish sense of observation. Like, there's a sort of 1950s book called A Guide to Observing the Weather, I think it is. And it's just a sort of list of changes in the weather. I mean, it's really quite bland. It's sort of train spotting, I suppose, with weather, but it's quite beautiful text at the same time. And I feel a little bit like that when I'm in the gallery. It's not scientific because I'm not exhaustive. I'm not trying to be, I'm not depersonalizing it. I'm attracted to certain objects that I want to kind of covet and take away with me. But it is, the activity, I suppose, is in registering an interest and then sort of withdrawing from it, rather than exercising that interest in the space at that time, in the present. It's something which I do afterwards. I think perhaps that's a little bit to do with kind of collecting, things that interest you, a bit of a magpie thing, which perhaps I'll come on to in the next section. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Actually, no, I won't. I think there were lots of other things I wanted to say about encounter, and I should just raise them really briefly, that are less to do with the kind of the moment and to do with me thinking about this before. Oh, well, I was going to talk a little bit about the encounter between works in an exhibition, which is to do with context, but the idea of, which we've sort of both of us, Harold and I think, referred to, which is the idea of one's experience of an exhibition or of a gallery being heavily influenced by all sorts of different circumstances in that present moment. So all kinds of different context, or the context, as you experience it at that time. Part of the value of an exhibition is obviously being able to see works in conjunction with other works, that you don't see them in isolation. So on a purely kind of artistic level or art historical level, that you're looking at the relationship between works, an encounter between different works, in a way that is not necessarily, wouldn't be the case if you were, or wouldn't be the case anyway, but only that encounter is different according to who's curating the show, what exhibition it is, and so on. And that produces different meanings in different works. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
communicate, just thinking about that idea of the encounter, I think for me it's very much framed by time and temporality, and in terms of that idea of the kind of that particular space of the here and now, you know, it's about that moment, you know, physically, psychologically, emotionally, when, you know, you're sort of confronted by the work, or, you know, and I think again, like sort of Eve said, in terms of that the context of that moment in time can often sort of frame that encounter, and so I think that's a kind of sort of partly an overriding thing. I think also as well in terms of that what happens as a result of that, kind of, for example, I think of instances of sort of being with works, whether that's immersed in the work or physically doing something because of the work, or just visually confronting the work, is that sense of often I have a sort of sense of understanding, and that kind of I guess I could sort of almost think about it in relation to kind of like the sci-fi encounter, that, you know, like that notion of encountering an alien for the first time, and that problem of kind of communication and language. And so like you're standing in front of ET essentially, and it's like he doesn't necessarily speak your language, but you've got to find some way of kind of communicating. And it's trying to kind of negotiate that shared language, I think, is often the challenge. And often it's frustrating in terms of, you know, initially I sort of find, well, I don't really understand this. And often I have to get over that hangover of that need to kind of instantly communicate and allow myself to kind of get past that. Another thing I was sort of thinking about was an idea of kind of sort of burn. I think there's this art collective called Ant Farm, and they did this project called, I think it's called Media Burn. And I was thinking about the idea of, and essentially it's dealing with like media strategies of media communication, but thinking about the idea of fast and slow burn. And I think about that in relation to kind of understanding through communication channels. So it's that idea like with TV, there's like a really fast burn that is instantly kind of communicated. And often there are works that are about the one-liner, that are about a kind of a superficial, instant kind of gratification. And then there are other things that are a kind of slow burn. And I think about works that I saw 4 years ago and didn't understand for at least 2 years, and then maybe through another conversation or another encounter, or they suddenly start to resonate. So I think that notion of the encounter again is sort of multifaceted, and while that initial encounter is temporal, I think in terms of its resonance, it can often ripple for longer periods of time outside of that initial meeting.